Her name had been Alida. She had been the same age as me, 16 sweet, innocent years. Like me, she had been a slave. I remember her now as having been beautiful, but it is likely that my memory cheats me. For had she been so, she would have gone into a harem of one of the great houses and not been relegated to the kitchen. I do know for certain that she had skin the colour and lustre of polished amber that was warm and soft to the touch. I will never forget the feel of Alida's body, for I will never experience anything like it again. In our misery we had found comfort and solace in each other. I never discovered who it was that betrayed us. I am not usually a vengeful man, but I still dream that one day I will find the person who delivered us up. At that time I had been my Lord Intef's favourite, his special darling. When he discovered that I had been faithless to him, the affront to his self-esteem was such as to drive him to the very frontier of madness. Rasper had come to fetch us. He dragged us to my lord's chambers, one of us in each hand, as easily as if we had been a pair of kittens. There he had stripped us naked, while my Lord Intef sat cross-legged on the floor, just as he is doing now. Rasper bound Alida's wrists and ankles with rawhide thongs. She was pale and shivering, but she did not weep. My love for her and my admiration for her courage had never been stronger than at that moment. My Lord Intef beckoned me to kneel in front of him, and he took a lock of my hair and whispered endearments to me. "Do you love me, Taita?" he asked. And because I was afraid, and because in some dim way I thought that it might spare Alida's suffering, I answered, "Yes, my lord, I love you." "Do you love anyone else, Taita?" he asked in a voice of silk, and coward and traitor that I was, I answered him, "No, my lord, I love only you." It was only then that I heard Alida begin to weep. It was one of the most harrowing sounds of my life. He called to Rasper, "Bring the slut here, place her so that they can see each other clearly. Taita must be able to see everything that is done to her." As Rasper pushed the girl into my line of vision, I could see that he was grinning. Then my master raised his voice slightly. "Very well, Rasper. You may proceed." Rasper slipped a loop of braided rawhide rope over Alida's forehead. At close intervals the rope was knotted, so that it looked like a headband such as the Bedouin women wear. Standing behind the girl, Rasper thrust a short, stout baton of olive wood through the rawhide loop and twisted it until it came up tight against her smooth, unblemished skin. The knots of harsh leather bit into her flesh, and Alida grimaced with the pain. "Slowly, Rasper," my lord warned him. "We still have a long way to go." The olive wood baton seemed like a child's toy in Rasper's huge, hairy paws. He twisted it with careful deliberation, a quarter of a turn at a time. The knots bit deeper, and Alida's mouth dropped open and her lungs emptied in a gasping rush of air. All the colour drained from her skin, so that it turned to the colour of dead ashes. She struggled to fill her empty lungs with air, and then released it in one long, penetrating scream. Still grinning, Rasper twisted the baton, and the line of leather knots buried themselves in Alida's forehead. Her skull changed shape. At first, I thought it was just a trick of my overwrought mind. Then I realized that her head was, in truth, constricting and elongating as the loop tightened. Her scream was now a single, unbroken peal that plunged into my heart like a sword blade. It went on and on for what seemed like forever. Then her skull burst. I heard the bone collapse with a sound like a palm nut crushed in the jaws of a feeding elephant. That terrible, piercing scream was cut off abruptly, as Alida's corpse sagged in Rasper's hands, and my soul was filled to overflowing with my sorrow and despair. After what seemed like an eternity, my Lord Intef lifted my head and looked into my eyes. His expression was sad and regretful as he told me, "She is gone, Taita. She was evil and she led you astray. We must make certain that it never happens again. We must protect you from any further temptations." Once again he signalled to Rasper, and he took Alida's naked body by the heels and dragged it out onto the terrace. The back of her crushed head bumped down the steps and her hair streamed out behind her. With a heave of his massive shoulders, Rasper threw her far out into the river. Her slack limbs flashed and tumbled as she fell and struck the water. She sank swiftly, with her hair spreading out around her like trailing fronds of the river weed.